we're getting into the last part, which is holding, cooling, and reheating. Okay, holding the temperature of the item. As I said before, hot food, hot, cold food, cold. Okay, when you have a buffet line that is that's holding hot foods, all items, we gotta make sure it's 135 degrees or higher. It should never drop anywhere lower than 135 degrees, because you already cooked it to the correct temperature, and then maintaining it above 135 means that it's going to stay out of the temperature danger zone. Same thing, salad bars, where the cold foods are, right? We want to make sure that it stays below 41 degrees Fahrenheit. And what's important about these things is that you have to check the temperature every 4 hours. So if you ever gone to a buffet line and you see an employee not only doing quality check, making sure that everything looks good, that everything is stocked up, but if they have a thermometer and they're just going in, checking the temperature, cleaning out their thermometer, moving on to the next one, checking the next one, what they're doing is making sure that the items stay cold. When a food inspector, health inspector comes in to check your restaurant, if you are a buffet line, guaranteed they will go and check your line to make sure that the temperatures are above 135 and below 41 degrees. If you don't have a buffet line, still the concept remains the same. You have to make sure that your items stay good. So not every item that you eat at a restaurant is made to order, meaning they don't make the meatloaf right there and then. That takes forever. If you're making meatloaf and that's one of your specials for the day at your restaurant, you're probably just gonna make a couple loaves of meatloaf, bake it, put the sauce on it, and then it's ready. Cook it to, since it's ground beef, 155 degrees. And then you have to maintain it at 135 degrees or higher. And so a lot of the times, restaurants have a special equipment called a hot box. Okay? When I worked at the diner, this is what we did. Our hot box had a little, it was electrical, and it had dials on here for the temperature and also for moisture, and then it told me the reading of what the temperature inside of that hot box was. And so we can set it to however hot we want, but we kept it around 140. That was our goal, so that it never dropped below 135. And so then these hot boxes have all these ledges where we could put sheet pans in. And then, so that meatloaf, for example, that we made, we have it in a pan, we stick it inside our hot box, keep it closed, and then it'll stay at 140 degrees, or 155, 140 degrees the whole time throughout our service. We have a hot box in our kitchen, and we use that for catering a lot because we can't make everything last minute. So when we were doing our catering for the advisory dinner, what we would do is, as much as possible, if we're making mashed potatoes or if we're making grilled vegetables, those things, even roasts, if we finish them like an hour ahead of time, just so that we are prepared, we put them in a pan, we stick them in the hot box, make sure that they stay hot. If by chance you notice that your hot box have dropped 130 degrees, something went wrong, the dials were changed, or it got unplugged or something, you gotta make sure that you check all the items inside. Sometimes if you catch it early enough, you don't have to throw away anything. If the items inside are still 135 degrees or higher, you're still okay. One of the things that I was gonna say too is if an item surpasses in the temperature danger zone for more than 2 hours, that item needs to be thrown away. The next important part is the cooling. Okay, so let's just say to the end of the day and you are done serving customers, you're cleaning up. Well, your hot foods can't stay hot, right? Because then the quality goes bad. You're not gonna keep something in the oven all night, right? Just because you wanna eat it the next day, it's gonna go bad. So what you want to do is you wanna cool it down properly. I'm gonna draw a thermometer. Now everyone watching this video, say it with me. What's the temperature danger zone? 41 degrees, 135. Yes, great job. So 41 degrees to 135. Let's just say it's about here. Okay. What is the critical zone, everybody? All right, let's say it again. Critical zone is 125 to about 70 degrees. Okay. Right here. This guy right here, this area, no matter what, we want to avoid. We do not want to keep food there for a very long time at all. Okay. That's where bacteria is like, whoopee, we have food. We want to eat. We want to avoid it. So, if you have an item that's 135 degrees or higher, let's start with 135. Within the first 2 hours, you want to drop it below 70 degrees. Okay? Within 2 hours. 70 degrees, no matter where you are. If you're coming from all the way to 165 degrees, it's still within 2 hours must drop to 70 degrees. Okay? Now, from then on, we're still in the temperature danger zone because that's 70 degrees, right? 41 is the minimum. So from 70 degrees to 41 degrees or lower, you have 4 hours. So in total, you get 6 hours, but that does not mean that you get 6 hours to go from 165 to 41 degrees. You have 2 hours to get it to 70 degrees, and then 4 hours to get it to 41 degrees. Okay, so now you're gonna be asking, well, chef, then how do we do that? How do we get it down so quickly? Glad you asked. Okay, we have a couple different methods. First one, we use ice as an ingredient. Number 2, divide the item into smaller containers. Okay? Meaning, which do you think will take longer to cool down? The big pot of chili, or if I took the chili and put them into smaller containers and then let it cool down? Which one do you think will take forever? Probably the pot of chili, because the inside temperature of the chili, the only thing that's cooling it down is all the surface area of the container. So just always think about it this way. So you got a smaller container versus a big, large pot, okay? The temperature inside is what we're worried about. How long do you think it's gonna take for that cool air to penetrate into that into that center compared to a smaller container? The smaller the container, the quicker it's gonna reach that center versus the big, large pot. Okay? The ice paddle. Ice paddle looks like this. We have one, we just bought this last year. So what happens is that you can see the line right there. You can either fill this whole thing with ice. Make sure it's clean and sanitized first because it's gonna touch food. But you can fill it with ice, or the easiest way to do it is just fill it with water up to the line and then stick the whole thing into the freezer. And so what happens to ice when it's in the freezer? It freezes over. This whole thing becomes a big block of ice. If you had that big pot of chili, like the example before, right? So if you stick the ice paddle inside the pot, then where is the cooling down coming from? Not only from the outside, right? From the outside, but now the ice paddle is hitting directly in the middle, and the ice is using its power to cool down your chili. The other method that we like to use is the ice water bath. Okay, so water bath is when, and you fill it with, as you guessed it, ice and water. And you just want enough water to help the ice like move around freely. Because you know, if you put a bunch of ice around something, it's just gonna stay in that spot. So if you add water, it actually helps to get that cold water all the way around a container. And then what you do is you can put your big pot of chili in there. And you always wanna make sure that the ice bath is as tall, or at least halfway, of your of the container that you are trying to cool down. So if your pot's that big, you want a container big like that. But the best way to cool down something is a mixture of two techniques. So it's actually this one and this one, okay? So instead of sticking your big pot of chili in there, you get your ice bath and you can just use like a shallow or a pan, so you don't have to use as much ice and water, but you're still using it. And then you have little containers. Like that, and boom, you're able to cool down very quickly. And again, the goal is to get from the hot to 70 degrees really quickly. And as soon as this reaches 70 degrees, in this, you want to do it this way, not inside a refrigerator. All right, this is huge, important part. You do not want to cool down something in a refrigerator, because what happens if you put it inside the refrigerator and your item is hot? Okay, all that steam and hot air is going to go in. What if you had products up here, okay, in another shelf? What's going to happen to those products? Well, that steam and the hot air from the food below is going to warm up that ingredient at the top, and it's going to ruin it. Not only that, it might not just even affect this guy, but the whole entire refrigerator. So never cool down anything in a refrigerator or a freezer, especially freezer, because then it's going to start thawing out everything and you really have a mess in your hands. You want to do one of these techniques first until it gets to 70 degrees, and then the next 4 hours you can remove it out of the ice bath. Make sure that it's in smaller containers, whatever you want to store it in overnight, and then you can take it into the refrigerator, and 70 degrees does not affect the refrigerator as bad as 135 degrees. Okay, there is a specific equipment called a blast chiller. Is a machine. It's a pretty expensive equipment machine that looks like a freezer, and you can, if you have items in smaller containers, it's even better. You stick it in the blast chiller, and it's like negative 10 degrees in there, and it's a lot of air circulating, and so that chills down the item really quickly, and you're able to get it down to 70 within 2 hours. And then the last part of this whole situation is reheating food. So you're coming back the next day and you're like, well, I had my meatloaf yesterday. We had some pieces left over. I want to try to sell it out today. What you have to do, bring it up to a certain temperature. If you're going to serve it immediately, as long as it's hot and it's a good quality, you're okay. However, when you're working at a restaurant and you need to reheat something for the sale of somebody else, meaning it's not immediate. So I have a whole piece of cooked meatloaf and I want to heat that whole thing up because I know I'm going to sell it by the end of the day. You have to make sure that you cook it up to 165 degrees. This makes sure that any kind of contamination, any disease that may have come to your ready-to-eat food in the refrigerator or in the holding situation, this kills anything. Reheating food to holding is 165, and it has to be there for at least 15 seconds. Okay, so I hope that this lecture helped with understanding the safe flow of foods in a restaurant, because this is going from purchasing all the way to reheating for your customers. Thank you.